think we have been discussing, most of the people around, we have been discussing since many years the problems that we face when we handle Indian intellectual debate. For instance, if we take political science, it begins with Greek philosophy. It doesn't take cognizance of Indian philosophy at all. There is no department in India where we have introduced any idea from Indian philosophy. At best, what we have done in the last 10 years is that we have started talking about modern Indian political thought, and we think that the modern Indian political thought can be understood without any grounding in the ancient Indian political thought. We don't even know, many of us don't even know that Gandhi has any link with Anekantwad. We only hear one word from somewhere. We don't think that Gandhi, to understand Gandhi, we really need to understand a lot of Indian philosophy too. So this has been the state of affairs in many of the disciplines. So many of us feel uncomfortable, but we don't have any common platform to start discussing this. Critic theory formalism emerged out of this discomfort. Many scholars in Delhi University initially thought that we should come together and start at least sharing these ideas. And obviously, to share these ideas, we needed to transcend the disciplinary boundaries. So by now, I think there are 3 generations of scholars in Delhi University, formally, informally discussing about this, and also people from JNU, people from other parts of the country. IIT, there are a few people in the IITs where they find that there is a need to assert this point. And I'm thankful to Rajiv, while discussing his book last time in Delhi University, this point came up again and again. And we thought that it would be a good occasion to invite everybody who has something in mind to share our ideas and then think whether we can take off from there. And what can we do from here? I'm thankful to Malini, whose last seminar actually provoked me to organize this kind of thing. Mohini, who provoked me to organize this kind of thing. And I think that there is a need to take this kind of project seriously and plan it in a way that without sounding as if we are getting into the identity politics between East and the West, we should initiate a process of democratic negotiation between different philosophical traditions. That's the idea we thought that should be projected. And also, while talking about different knowledge traditions, it should be possible to talk about the idea of the liberation. And we go by that famous statement from Marx that freedom of one should be guarantee of freedom of all, and freedom of all should be guarantee of freedom of one. So if we take that as an initial project, the liberation of human beings, the universal liberation of human beings, from there we start negotiating with different traditions. Probably that would be something that can be a project for 21st century. So keeping this in mind, I thought it would be good to invite all of you and Rajiv to engage on this idea and then plan out some kind of future project. The idea of the workshop, let me just briefly talk about it, is that initially he will talk about this, his own book, and about the project that he has in mind. Then in the second and third session, we will talk about our own projects and the way we feel uncomfortable and we have problems and we could see this kind of thing and how can we visualize this project. One of the projects could be, I'm proposing that all of us from our own standpoints write articles and we collect them together so that we can make an intervention to start with about our discomfort with the mainstream knowledge system. There could be many more, as I have written in the proposal, that there could be 2-3 stages of that. One of the stages, of course, in the first book of this kind. The second would be picking up some of the text, as Kaviraj is doing. He's taking some text and trying to see whether that text has some meaning for political scientists or social scientists at large. So picking up some text and using those texts to as a starting point to engage with the Indian knowledge traditions. And third level could be when we move to the real world, in the social world, and see how Indian philosophy is still existing in practice. And that is one of the reasons why I think this project is very important. Because I don't think that this philosophy is merely existing at the very high intellectual level. I think people at the grassroots are still guided by this philosophy. They're still making sense of their life, making sense of their relationship with other human beings and nature with the help of this philosophy. And they are in deep trouble. They are in conflict. And that conflict is quite troublesome. I remember when I went to a village in Mithila during our philosophical journey, that's what we organized. The whole village actually was divided into two parts. One group was modernist and other was traditionalist. And they used to fight among each other. And there was a common place, tea shop in the village. Whenever you go there, you will find there will be some debate going on. And I could locate those people, and we really had a nice time talking about this. So this is something which is living at the moment. People are in conflict. I see a scientist.
East Bank.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. The scientist going abroad, coming back, and going to Haridwar to take a dip. So that I mean, this is a real conflict, and since we have ignored this kind of a thing. We have not. So people are living at two different levels. And this is the time when I think we need to engage with this kind of conflict. I have a classical example of this type, which I gave that in that workshop. Also, let me share that with you. Probably I shared with Mohini also that Om thing, that a comrade who was suffering from some ailment, went for yoga and discovered that yoga was really helping, and came back and said, oh, what to do, because they are asking me to pronounce Om. And they're saying that if you pronounce Om, some gland will be vibrated. So he called his own friends, comrades, and said that what to do. And then a comrade suggested that why don't you say Mao, Mao, he'll probably say that will do Om after some time. So this reflects the classical case of conflict that we are living with. So therefore, I think one thing is what Rajiv is suggesting, that in US also, a lot of problems are there due to the fact that we want to talk about Indian tradition. One of the classical examples that he gives is that when people talk of dialogue between religions, they talk of tolerance. And he wanted to suggest that why do you talk of tolerance? Talk of mutual respect. And there's a big problem because of that. So probably this is something which is happening, which has been happening since long, and now we are becoming a little more conscious about it, and we can now come together to talk about it at least. That would be the way of initiating a new process of this dialogue. And this dialogue actually happened in a big way during freedom struggle. I do not know what happened. We are trying to find out. Some people are doing some research. Shashank is working on that. What happened after 1947? That we dropped this project of engagement with the Indian knowledge tradition. I think Gandhi, Aurobindo, anybody engaged with this tradition, but suddenly we dropped this, and suddenly we thought that this is all useless knowledge. So in a way, it would be reclaiming that tradition of engagement. That's the idea, and I think things will flow when we discuss.
I was a technocrat, physics by training, physics and computers by training. And then in '94, I decided to give up all that and learn what you would call the humanities. So for the last 17 years or more, I've been full-time. I don't have it's not a hobby, it's not something I do on weekends, it's or the only thing I do. So I don't have any profession, business, any other thing. And I will tell you my first shock, and you learn through shocks and you learn through encounters with others who are outside your comfort zone. So my first shock was when my foundation wanted to give a grant to for the study and teaching of Indian philosophy at Columbia University. And the dean was so happy, he wanted to build bridges with the Indian community because he thought it was going to be important. But at that meeting, not a single person from the philosophy department showed up. And a number of others showed up from religion department, psychology department, not philosophy department. I did not understand at that time, which I understand very acutely now, the fragmented nature of humanities into disciplines and the boundaries between them, the boundaries politically, the boundaries in terms of their theories and the methodologies they use, and hence a very artificial project called interdisciplinary. The very existence of interdisciplinary would be alien to the Indian knowledge systems, where philosophy and dance is inseparable, and dance and music are inseparable, and Ayurveda is inseparable from the philosophy. So the integral nature of Indian knowledge systems, and I have a whole chapter 3 on this in this book, integral versus synthetic. The integral nature of Indian knowledge systems is very different from the synthetic nature of the Western humanities. That's why science is disconnected from other fields. Science and religion are disconnected. So and I explained why, how the history of the West has resulted in that. The history of the West as an artificial synthesis of a whole lot of things, without starting with a holistic worldview at the very beginning. So since there hasn't been one holistic worldview or one cosmology, one metaphysics from which all these knowledge systems emerge, therefore they have several starting points, often in mutual conflict, and they have to be artificially put together with interdisciplinary projects. Unfortunately, Indians and Indian education system have imported that, and so we have some of the same problems in India also. Now, I found that the philosophy department in Columbia's resistance was, they said there is no such thing as Indian philosophy. That was their position, very clearly. You see, the philosophers in the West are the most honest. You'll find hypocrites in many other fields, but I was very impressed. They came out with a very straight stand, that we do not think there is any such thing as Indian philosophy. So I said, yeah, but I go to all these conferences and they're talking about the neurological effects of yoga, and they're talking about medicinal benefits that come from the East. How come that you're appropriating all that, and you're saying that there's no legitimate thing? And that is when the answer came, yes, that is maybe appropriate, maybe good, but it's in the religion department, or it's in cognitive science department, it's not in philosophy department. Very interesting boundary they put on what constitutes real philosophy. So I decided I'd give up on the philosophy departments. Later I realized there are 2 philosophy centers where you get a PhD in Indian philosophy. One is University of Hawaii, and so there we started a project which lasted a decade, where we really built up their department with philosophy, graduate students, lectures, new courses, back and forth debates between Indian thought and Western thought. And the other was in University of Austin, Texas, not to the same extent as Hawaii. These are the 2 places where, at that time, you could get a PhD in a philosophy department on Indian philosophy. Otherwise, you could get some degree in a religion department. Because religion is the belief of a people. Everybody has a religion. It doesn't have to be legitimate. But philosophy is really is truth. Philosophy is the quest for truth. So philosophy only the West has. Others can have religion. And this dichotomy between philosophy and religion was also very unusual for me, because I never thought of it that way, whether there is some difference. Because when you say Dharma, you are not talking about that, okay, thought, reason has to be excluded from that. So this is quite a revelation. So my foundation started, we got into traditional knowledge systems, and we said the inner realm, which we call Indian psychology. We started a bunch of projects back in 2000, or before 2000. We started a discussion e-group called Yoga Psychology, which still is active. And we started giving grants to have conferences on Indian psychology. A lot of them started in, that's also an interesting story. In 2000, IIT Kharagpur was going to do its 50th anniversary, Golden Jubilee. And so they called us for a grant on one of the seminars. They wanted to have several mini conferences. One of them was going to be on mind sciences. So they sent me a grant to fund mind sciences. And I said, send me the list of speakers and the program. And I found that all of it was Western psychology. Western psychology, either Western speakers or Indian speakers, but all the topics of Western psychology. So I wrote to them saying, I'm very interested in the program, but I don't think you should exclude Indian psychology. And if you are willing to do a panel on Indian psychology, then we would like to sponsor it. And I got back this very short answer saying, we are not chauvinists, we are scientists, we only believe in what is scientifically valid, and that kind of thing. So here I discovered something else. I got hold of 4 or 5 white guys who are really into Indian thought. One wrote Cambridge, he wrote a book on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Another is a Buddhist, Robert Thurman at Columbia. Another is somebody who's done Kundalini for 30 years and he practices it and he teaches cognitive science. Like that I got 4 or 5 white guys. And I said, you've always told me that, you've always said that I'm complaining about you having taken so much out of our tradition and not paid back. And now's your chance. I told them that. Now you can pay back. So they said, how? And I said, well, we have a conference and I want you to go to that conference and explain authentically what is the history of your involvement with this tradition, who taught you, where you learned it, how it benefited you, why you teach it in the West, what is the response from the students. And I don't want you to translate the Sanskrit words and hide them, and I don't want you to hide the tradition from where you learned all this. You should be very truthful. So one of them is initiated by Dalai Lama, one of them is initiated by some guru somewhere. I said, you have to talk about all that. This is why you're going there. So I took their dossiers and their proposals and I sent it to IIT Kharagpur. They immediately accepted all of them because they're white guys. So that complex. I learned about it. That's the complex. You get white guy to say this. This is called the pizza effect. Pizza was a folksy dish. It was something like, in Punjab you eat makki roti and saag. It's not something that, some big high shot guy will serve at dinner, like some peasant thing. Pizza was a peasant thing, and then it was not acceptable for modern high-class people to be serving pizza. But then Pizza Hut, American company, took it, made it into a global kind of a thing, and the Italians were very proud that, our pizza is everywhere. They are like very proud people. So the pizza effect refers to the syndrome that the Italians started feeling comfortable about eating pizza, because now Americans are eating it. That's all. So I use the pizza effect all the time. I use it till today. I have trained a whole lot of white guys, so when I'm really in trouble, I get them to come and say, now you got to talk to these guys, because people will listen to you. So, this worked, and the IIT Kharagpur people gave them a good standing ovation, these guys. And this launched a whole series of Indian psychology conferences, which we went on for 7-8 years. And we started this program in Hawaii on Indian philosophy. So we had a few experiences of that kind. We also started a series of books on history of Indian science and technology, of which 9 volumes have come out. They are about metallurgy, city building, architecture, water harvesting, agriculture, things of a very practical nature. And the reason we wanted to do that is to fight the myth that Indian knowledge systems are only very abstract and philosophical with no practical value. And we wanted to show that actually the Indian knowledge systems have been used to do very practical scientific technological things also. So that was that. I'll just say a few more words and then let the process continue here. I found that the Indian knowledge has been a source of appropriation into the West. So that's another topic of my research, is how Indian knowledge is being appropriated into the West. I coined a term in this book called Western Universalism, which refers to taking Western history, Western philosophy, Western aesthetics. Aesthetics is a very important part of it. Western values, and considering them to be universal, the universal template. That was a very Hegelian project, to turn it into a universal template and evaluate everybody against that. So whether you're ahead or behind and what is wrong with you and what has to be done to you is judged against that standard, and the standard is the West. So this Western universalism is the problem that I'm considering to be the real problem facing the world, including the West itself. Because they've run out of things, this Western universalism has reached its limits, and the West is now facing a crisis of its own myth. Similar crisis took place in the 60s, when, because of the Vietnam War and because of Watergate and women's lib and civil rights movement, a lot of upheaval was happening, and the West was in turmoil. Again, it's in turmoil today. At that time, the West was in turmoil, not knowing who we are. All our myth about our grand past seems to be shattered. all this idea that we are the future seems to be in disarray. So a lot of the Westerners went east. A lot of them ended up in India. They got into yoga and gurus, and the whole New Age movement started. A lot of these gurus went to the West to cater to that. And that was because the myth got shattered, so they had to look outside for resources. And I see in the last few years there is a similar thing happening. The West's myth today is being shattered. So there is an opportunity to engage them, because there are enough Westerners who will go along with this, what we're talking about. Because they think that non-Western civilizations do have sources, do have ideas that ought to be included. So there is a window of opportunity to do this kind of work. In fact, even include Westerners, because Westerners are not necessarily hostile to somebody who wants to undermine Western universalism. Many Westerners I come across are very happy that somebody is undermining Western universalism, because they also believe that it's overplayed its life. So the term I introduced here called digestion is how one civilization gets digested into another. So, they are trying to, China is trying to digest Tibet. And, the so-called pagans, the pre-Christian faiths got digested into Christianity. They took the Christmas tree and the Easter and many things they took. So when a tiger eats a deer, it takes all the useful things and turns them into tiger's own DNA. And what it cannot absorb is excreted as waste. There is no more deer DNA left. When the digestion is over, the deer is not going to exist as a living thing. So being digested means you turn into a museum civilization. You sit in the museum, people will come and admire and say, hey, these were a great civilization. They had this book, their language called Sanskrit. There is in glass, behind glass, a book. It's called the Gita. They used to read it. These guys were smart people. But they are no more, and they've been digested. So this idea of digestion is what I'm trying to resist. And the book I've just written is resisting digestion by showing what is distinct and different about us, that is non-digested. And so with that I will stop, because I think I could go on, but I want to hear from everybody, and thank you very much.